everybody. We're here for another episode of Capital Spotlight. Today we have Yuri Beckelman, Chief of Staff for Rep. Maxwell Frost. He's had a lot of other cool jobs across the Hill, which we'll get into. He was a critical part of the Modernization Committee for a while, got a lot of cool recommendations implemented into Congress. He is one of the main people trying to innovate the way things are done on Capitol Hill. So we dive into that. He's also a very interesting person outside of work. He's big into brewing his own beer. He likes to cook. He's got a 3D printer. This one is very interesting, all over the place, but a super cool guy and a lot of functional information here. He has a very interesting take on bipartisanship, so listen in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Capital Spotlight. Today, we are here with Yuri Beckelman, the Chief of Staff for Representative Maxwell Frost. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is going to be great.
Yeah, you are an absolute Hill vet, so we're excited to have you. Please tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I came to the Hill the same way many people come to the Hill. I came here for an internship on the Senate side, and if you want to put in like the sound effect of a boo, I'm okay with that because it's like I'm a House person, and been working on the House side since about 2006. I started with my hometown Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, right when she became Speaker of the House the first time around. And that was a wild experience. Happy to kind of get into that, like starting up an office that is taking over the speakership, which was really interesting. Went to go work as a legislative assistant in Congressman Anthony Weiner's office. That all kind of crashed and burned, as you can imagine. But you come out stronger from those things. Went to go work for the AFL-CIO for a little bit. Really proud of that. I grew up in the labor movement. My father was a labor organizer and then a labor attorney for the hotel and restaurant employees in San Francisco, which was really like a foundational thing for my view of politics in the world. Came back, went to go work for Mark Takano from California, Congressman Mark Takano, just one of the nicest people you will ever imagine. Behind the scenes, the real deal, just a great guy. Did a lot of work I'm really proud of in that office. Was with him for, I think, 8 or 9 years. Wow. Left only because the dream job landed in my place. I ended up where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there, and that was as the staff director for the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. Stayed there for 2 years, not by choice, right? I would have loved to stay, but the committee was a select committee and wrapped up its time. Amazingly proud of the work that we did there. It was 2 years, but it felt like 20, right? It took a lot out of me, but in the best possible way. And now I'm working for Congressman Maxwell Frost, who is just the real deal. We've put together a team that we're just cranking on all cylinders, just coming up with ideas, putting them forward, and really seeing a lot of success, even in the minority, and have just been really proud to do it. I don't have plans to go anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, well, at least you landed on your feet. You got a cool name brand member who's new, who has some unique attributes that make it fun to make that jump, and a good continuation of the work on ModCom to come over to fresh new member who has a younger perspective on everything. And I think that's got to help when it comes to your attempts to try to innovate Congress.
Yeah, well, we get to take everything that we discussed and proposed and start an office the right way and run an office the right way. So much of the Hill has been based around, well, it was done this way. It's been done this way. It's always going to be done this way. And the truth of it all is it doesn't have to be done that way. It never did. And it's living proof though in our office. We have had zero turnover. Wow. We have an office that is comfortable, right? You can, people like working with us, and we encourage work-life balance. And more than just saying, you should have a work-life balance, we actually create systems to encourage people to really take care of themselves. And I get to live what we preached and discussed, and I still am working on implementation of all of the good work that we've done, and the congressman's all on board. He doesn't come from the school of we've done it this way always, right? He's new here, and so when he gets frustrated by one of the outdated systems, I get to tell him, well, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. If you want to fix it, you are a member of Congress, here are the people to talk to fix it. Let's do this, and he's all about it.
Nice, that's great. I want to dive into some personal stuff before we get too deep into the professional, but real quick on that front, I love hearing how people view work-life balance and what you're doing to encourage that in your office. Michelle Dorothy, who I don't know if you've ever had.
Course.
Cool.
Yeah.
She has some great ideas on this that you can see on a Connect podcast as well. But would love to hear how your office is trying to encourage work-life balance.
So we have, some of the base, but I have a couple of unique ones that I'll share. But my favorite, and I want to put that, you really need to put this in your office if you want to create long-term stability and encourage people. So, all right, let me step back just real quick. Okay, so we did some interesting work on ModCom and looked at what was making people unhappy. Because you should always start there. What is actually happening, right? And the junior staff and the senior staff both hated their pay, but loved their benefits. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Like your senior staff have this amazing pension that they're going to walk off into the sunset with, right, at some point. And your junior staff have a good suite. It's healthcare, it's transit benefits, it's dental, it's vision, it's all these things. Mid-tier staff didn't like their pay, let's be very clear, but didn't hate it as much, but they hated their benefits. And if you think about it, right, like they couldn't start a family, buy a home, or continue their education.
Yeah.
We did a bunch of work on there. So the first one I want to start with is that we do a 4-month paid leave for maternity, paternity leave.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's rivaling the private sector or even better than the private sector.
And, when I wrote that in our office handbook, I looked around at the team and I said, I am doing this first and foremost because I'm getting ready to use it myself. And I used it and I actively walked away. But now we have other staff doing it and setting an example that, like, when we write these things into policy, you are encouraged to use it. I will say a lot of this, like, use your benefits mentality came to me from working in the labor movement.
Gotcha.
Where I was, like, demanded to take advantage of my benefits. I had to use vacation days. They would force you to. It's great. But we also have this fun... we do something for August, which everybody knows the culture is to go somewhere and do something and get away. I remember being a junior staffer saying, everyone's having these wonderful vacations, but I don't have the money for that.
For sure.
And that's an anxiety that I'm trying to quell as the chief. And we do a $500 bonus leading up to summer break. That they can do with whatever they want. They can use it to pay their bills. Yeah. But it is a signal from management that we want you to use your vacation days, and we're going to make it even easier for you by giving you this vacation bonus.
Man, that's
to encourage
really cool.
It.
Wow. I think you're going to get some people that want to work in your office after this one.
I will say, as a strange note, too, is I'm pretty sure that when I was in the Takano world, I wrote the very first teleworking policy for like a personal office.
Nice. And what year was that?
Oh, man. It was way pre-pandemic. I want to say it was 2018, maybe earlier than that, maybe 2017. And it was one day a month during recess. And can I tell you the backlash I got from other offices?
Oh, my gosh.
Your staff won't work. How can you do this? Now my staff wants it. This is ridiculous. And we wrote a policy and told people not to abuse it. And no one abused it. It's really that simple. Yeah. Like, just set expectations and people won't abuse it. And now we live in a world where everyone has a telework policy. Right?
Just a trendsetter. Nice. And you have a lot of ways that you like to innovate inside of Congress, and we will definitely get to that. But real quick, please tell us who you are. Like, where did you grow up? Like, tell us about your upbringing, and then how you got here today, who you are outside of politics.
Yeah. I grew up in San Francisco. It's a really special city to me, and more so than just growing up in San Francisco. I grew up in a neighborhood called the Mission, and it was a real, middle class, upbringing, and kind of a rough neighborhood, but a neighborhood with a ton of culture, and it made me who I am, and it's really wonderful. My upbringing, my father was a labor organizer, my mom was involved in it too, and I spent a lot of my childhood on picket lines because it was cheaper than childcare.
There you go.
And I remember doing all that, and it's funny. There's like this story of like what was some of my first words, and one of my first words was local 2, which was the union my father worked in. But it was a lot of like discussion about the dignity of work and like what it means to be a working people person and not be kind of abused in the workplace, and that just kind of is the core of the foundation of who I am. Empathy for people as they struggle through this human experience, and my like goal of helping them get there, and that's really kind of what set me on this journey. Yeah. for me, what my political awakening was, because you have parents in politics, that doesn't mean you're into politics, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was in California. I was in middle school, and I was. It was a predominantly Latino school, Hispanic school, and there was a proposition called Prop 187 that passed that would have required children of undocumented immigrants to not receive public services of any kind. And I remember looking around that class thinking I was not the best student in that class, and there were much better students who would no longer be able to come back to school, and thinking that was unjust and not right. And it led to a middle school walkout, and that was my own personal political awakening. Politics should be personal to you. It shouldn't just be a game, and it shouldn't be something you learned about in school. It should be something that is personal to you. And that kind of took me down this journey. It's also what turned California blue. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but California was purple at that time, very much so. And this targeting of I don't want to get too political, but the targeting of immigrants turned California the way that it is, which is solidly blue. And
yeah, interesting. Because it goes from like the Reagan years, where a lot of Republican ideals and won him the presidency, or partially. I mean, it was a blowout. But so it's funny how that switch happened so quickly, and you always wonder, like, wait, what
happened?
Yeah,
yeah.
So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So who are you today outside of politics? What do you like to do?
Yeah, well, this is the life I'm living right now, and it's wonderful. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a maker, and a Hill staffer, and I love all of those things about me. And I have a 7-month-old at home, and recently bought a house. It's true. You can buy a house in this career if you
work really hard and you only eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 15 years.
The one piece of advice I would give to a Hill staffer who wants to forward this career is buy something as early as you can, even if it's small and uncomfortable. Build equity, which will allow you to make better decisions later on in your life. The city has a bunch of great programs for it. It seems so daunting and overwhelming. But I will tell you, the best time to purchase a home was always 3 years ago.
Yeah,
so figure out how to get yourself there, even if it's tiny and dingy, whatever. You will build equity. So, I have all of these things that just make me really happy. In all aspects of my life, I think I get to utilize the creativity that is like core to what I need to be happy and successful, and especially in the job. And
nice.
My wife's also a chief on the Hill. We share that experience.
Wow, that's you bring home or work home with you and to work every single day.
Well, we commute together.
Nice.
We drop our daughter off at the house daycare. We brainstorm together. We don't talk about work that much, but when we really need like advice from each other, there's no better advisor than someone who knows you and also does the same work as you.
Absolutely. For the Hill staffers out there who are balancing a relationship inside politics, what are some recommendations on what to talk about or how to build a relation outside of politics?
Good. You got to find activities together, right? There are shared interests that are different than like we both like this one book. But if you find someone who just really enjoys reading, that's not what brings me and my wife together. Yeah. My wife and I, we're both like to make things and like do things and be active. The test of any good relationship, Hill or not, is often travel together because you put yourself in high anxiety situations and you understand, you see how this person reacts when things are a little tough.
Yep. I know that one, experienced it recently.
Yeah, totally. And you can create long-term relationships and then every once in a while you get to work on something together and it's wonderful. Cool. It's super interesting and super fun.
Nice. And so outside of politics, you said you like to build things. You're being coy here. Please tell us about what you build.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that like if I enjoy something, food or whatever, I think to myself immediately, like, could I do this? Could I make right? That's like where my head goes initially.
I get
that. So we have a whole list of things that we like to get involved with. The one that we like talking about because it's a funny, interesting story is we like to make beer.
For sure.
We're 3-time award-winning homebrew, but there's the Capitol Hill does a homebrewing competition, which is super fun. We've come in like second and third.
That's awesome.
Hill-centric beers. We make a beer called Apropes Saison.
Okay, I was gonna say there better be some punny names in here.
Yeah, and it's always just a lot of fun, and it's one of those things that like I often kind of refer to myself as like a completionist because the work that we do is so open-ended. Rarely do you pass a bill, right? Like you have an idea. This is how it should be, right?
Yeah.
You should have an idea, and it takes you time to develop that idea, to socialize that idea, to sharpen that idea before it's ready to go somewhere. But it's so open-ended that you often feel like you have 300 projects all running at the same time, and it can be exhausting trying to keep track of that mentally. And so to kind of counterbalance that, I like to start a project and end a project and walk away from that project.
Yeah,
and
good.
things like beer, making beer help you with that because there's
And
a start date and end
drinking it,
date.
yeah.
I will tell you, the first time that we made beer, sat down and drank some of it and started to get a little bit of a buzz, and we're like, this works. That was an amazing moment.
How many times of sitting down and drinking it and going, this is terrible before you got there?
We've been pretty successful.
All right. That's cool.
We're not going overboard. We're mostly doing kits and things that we've expanded some out of that, but like, yeah, no, our beer usually comes out pretty good.
How did you get into this interest?
It's just like one of many interests, but it was definitely something I expressed wanting to do. And when my wife and I were dating early on, we didn't really know what to buy each other, and both took a little bit of a gamble. And I bought my wife a paella making class.
There you go.
And she bought me a beer making class.
That's awesome.
And we ended up doing both the same weekend, and it was a lot of fun. And my wife still to this day makes amazing paella, and together my wife and I make a lot of beer because you make 5 gallons at a time.
Okay.
And so and you have to let it sit for a while. So you end up having 10 gallons of beer, and it's just it's pretty great. We love to make a Christmas ale, which is like a great beer.
Fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know I used to love Trogs. They do a very good Christmas beer. So
I personally think Great Lakes is the all end all be all of Christmas beers. But
Fair enough.
I do think Anchor Steam used to make before they went under a great Christmas ale as well.
Gotcha. So do you just have kegs lying around the house, or how do you store it?
Yeah, so it's just these big glass. They're called carboys, and we had a condo until recently, and they were just kind of in a corner somewhere with a towel over them.
There you go.
And I don't know how much you know about making beer, but basically beer.
I don't know anything
So
about it.
it's really simple. You're basically making a sugar water.
Okay.
Right? You make a
And then
sugar
the
water.
yeast.
And then you have yeast eats the sugar, and the byproduct of yeast eating sugar is it makes alcohol.
There you go.
And so it's just like you have this thing and it's bubbling, and so you're like, what was that? And you hear this bubble in the back, but it's just like the yeast eating the sugar and creating the off gassing of it.
Nice. I have so many questions. I don't know where to go with this, but I guess what types of beers do you make? Is it like a Pilsner? Is it an IPA?
So we've made a bunch. I'm not an IPA person.
Gotcha.
It's a fascinating thing. This is a weird side tangent, but Bud Light is one of the that style of beer is one of the hardest styles of beer to make because beer making is all about consistency.
Okay.
If it's not consistent, it's not. So if you go to a brewery and it tastes a little sweet or it doesn't taste like the time before, that's a bad brewery.
Okay.
Bud Light is a miracle of science that they can produce that type of beer at that scale all over the world. Maybe it's not your favorite beer, good, right? But that's a miracle of science. IPAs are the opposite. Oftentimes, they put a lot of hops in to kind of it's not cover it, but beer is sugar water. You balance it with this hops, which is a bittering agent.
For sure.
And if you put a bunch, you can create high alcohol and a bittering agent. And it's just bitter, as we all know.
Yeah.
But there's not as much science that goes into that, if that makes sense. So I'm just not an IPA person, but I like to make triples, saisons. Lagers are interesting because you actually have to keep them cold in a refrigerator while they're making. Christmas ales, I think, are the best.
Nice.
Yeah. So but we're open to experimenting. We've done some red ales and some brown ales.
What do you put into your Christmas ale to make that flavor?
It is a lot of what you'd think. A lot of it is just kind of the hops you're using and sort of the sugaring agents. But you're also putting in clove and you're putting in cinnamon and all those things for the spice. Yeah, it's interesting.
Wow, that's awesome. So, what are some of your favorite breweries around here?
Okay, I am at this point. I like Right Proper a lot.
Okay, where's that?
They have 2. There's one up in Brookland, but they also have one right next to the Howard Theater.
Cool.
I think they're really great. I was a big fan of 3 Star, but they closed not too long ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but DC has a great beer scene. When I moved to DC, this is how sad things were. There was not a single brewery that made beer in DC proper.
How life has changed.
Right? Atlas was not Atlas. Sorry, DC Brau was the very first.
Gotcha.
We had DC Brewing Company, but it was brewed in Virginia.
Ah, jeez.
Right? That's just like a fallacy.
You gotta sue them for like false advertising.
And now we have all these great ones, and we had this like renaissance of liquor making, and a lot of that stuff comes about because of what we do in Congress. It's an interesting thing. It's how we regulate policy and how difficult we make it to bring things to market. This is like another side tangent, but you get people who come in your office. Why don't we have more of a renaissance of sake and soju and those things? It's because those are weirdly kind of regulated. Because sake you think of as wine, right?
Yeah.
But it's much more. Its process of making is much more akin to beer making.
For sure. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We could keep going on this for a while, but what are some other things that you make? You say you make a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So what else?
I was down a hole with 3D printers for a while. I loved a good 3D printer. We had a 3D printer in the Takano office. He was head of the Maker Caucus, and we ran a maker fair, and that was a ton of fun. Anything I can get my hands on, I don't have to go too far down. I'm just trying to kind of get some basics and understanding of it. A fun project I used to do for team building with my offices was there's a maker space in Northern Virginia called Building Momentum.
Okay.
And they would host like team workshops where we'd get everyone out and we'd do wine and welding. Literally drink wine and then you'd learn how to weld. Much less dangerous than it sounds.
I still don't know if I agree with you on that one.
You go there and you do it and you'll see that the equipment. It's really simple. And you have a fun experience, and so you learn the basics of just welding a straight line, which is just seems like rocket science until you do it, and then they give you this pile of metal, of bolts and pipes and chains, and they go build something with this.
That's cool.
And then and everyone makes like wine racks out of it, and it's a wild experience. And then you leave with this thing welded together that can hold a bottle of wine.
Wow!
It's just like this realization that most things are not nearly as complicated as they seem. To do it well is very. I would not undermine a good a proper welder. It's like that's not what I'm doing. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
But like the basic understanding of it is really not that complicated.
Very cool. So for the chiefs out there, for the other office leaders who want to do something for their team. Go drink some wine and weld.
Well, but it's a good. The theory behind it. There is theory behind it, right? Of that if you want to build strong teams, they always say relationships are better developed when the experience is deep rather than regular.
Gotcha.
So it's better than having a weekly coffee with everyone sits around for 20 minutes having a coffee. If you create an opportunity where people try something new that they are not comfortable with, they will have a deeper experience and build a deeper bond. Okay. And having people drink some wine and weld is like a very intense experience. It's not, but it feels that way, and people will bond in a much more meaningful way.
Nice. All right. Well, on that note, are there any other cool ideas that you have when it comes to team bonding, or as a leader in an office, how do you create good team culture?
Well, one I'm doing right now, which is super fun, and it came out of something that my wife was doing in her office, but then also ModCom. We had the authority to offer recommendations for all of the House's agencies. Okay. Right? And most people in personal offices don't always think about that there are personal offices, member, committee, and leadership offices. Sorry, so like personal is the member, right? But there's also what we refer to as business support offices, right? There's the CAO, there's the AOC, and there's CAO, AOC, and the clerk, right? Yeah. And after that, there's also the congressional support agencies, which are CBO, GPO, GAO, right? All of these like agencies. There's also kind of other side tangents too, right? Like you have the legislative drafters, you have the botanical gardens right there. That's House property.
Interesting.
Right? And so we would go and visit them. And they would tell us what they did. Nice. And we would ask them what they needed, how to strengthen what they were doing. And so regularly I take my team on what I refer to as better know the House. I don't know if you watched Colbert and his old series, Better Know a District.
No, I don't think I've ever seen that.
So Colbert, I don't know, how he got famous. He was on The Daily Show, and then he had his like spin-off show where he impersonated Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
And he would interview House members, and it was called Better Know a District, and he would basically make fun of them, and it was pretty funny. So I call it Better Know the House, and we go out and we visit an agency or support office and have them tell us what they do, and builds really great relationships and a face between the person that you're working with.
Sure.
And they also tell you all of these resources that they have that we didn't know they had. Like you can get legal support from the Government Accountability Office.
There you go.
Right? How to sign on to letters, request letters to GAO to get more things done. So we've done GAO, we did the clerk's office, and we have a whole list of other ones that we want to go. We did GPO, which I don't know if you know that it's on North Cap. It's this giant red building.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go in there, that's Congress owns that. House owns that. Like it's our operations, and if you ever wonder why a bill takes so long to get up on Congress.gov, like in the summary section or even just kind of listed, the GPO will explain it to you. It's not that like they can't just type it into a computer. There's a whole back end process, and you'd never know that if you didn't sit there and talk with them and they explain to you what's going on.
Cool. So you have a very innovative mindset. In my mind, it makes me think of startup world, and maybe it's because you grew up in San Francisco. It's just more like that out there. But you've worked predominantly in the private sector or in the public sector. So how did you develop that sort of innovative mindset?
That's a good question. I will say, as a interesting thing is, in San Francisco, there was a bit of a startup culture even early on. I remember buying our first computer at this place called Whole Earth Access, which I think only like real deep computer geeks will know. I didn't know it as a kid, but it was a store that specialized in like off-grid living.
That's cool.
That sold some of the first homebrew computers.
Love that.
That like is like legendary in some circles, but I didn't know this growing up. It was just like down on Bayshore Boulevard in San Francisco that we would go to. But where I get my mindset, I don't know. It's just process. If you start thinking about things through the mindset of process, you start eliminating frustrations. And for me, that's what it is. Is like all of the frustrations I have in work and in life, instead of allowing them to continue to exist the way that they are, I start thinking about like, well, why is it like that way? Why is it like that? And how do I fix it?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to live with it that way, right? I don't want to, I don't want to set up a system where I'm frustrated by too many hours.
Yeah.
And you step back and you go, well, do these people need to be here during these hours? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I'm frustrated that this event didn't come together, right? Like someone didn't get me the slides and the tech didn't work and all of these things. And so you create a process and a system so that everything works every time, and it eliminates that frustration, and you are a happier person. And I can't recommend enough. Every time you run into a problem more than once, try to figure out why it was a problem and try to eliminate it.
Yeah, that's the true entrepreneur mindset, right? And a lot of times you just get frustrated by those situations, like, oh, this freaking thing, and then just kind of leave it aside and don't do anything about it. So it's great that you're thinking that way, and I think that's a true gift. I know you've described yourself as a policy entrepreneur, and I want to get into that, but first, like, have you ever thought about creating a business? I mean, you do a lot of side things, which in its own way are entrepreneur-based, but...
Absolutely. I would love to at some point. I think that's absolutely something in my career in the future, but I really love what I'm doing, and I like giving my all to it, and I feel like a lot of what I do each time I'm creating something new is in some ways its own business.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, but through this like lens of like public service and public good, and so I feel like I'm creating businesses all the time, even if I'm not creating a business in that moment.
I think it's super important too that all of the innovation isn't just in the private sector, but there are people inside our government who are thinking of better processes to accomplish the huge problems that our government faces, and that we don't just get annoyed and go, oh, well, that's just how it is, So very thankful to have you on the inside, and maybe don't go create a business and just keep working on the hill and do your thing. But what does it mean to you to be a policy entrepreneur?
The reason I love this job is because I can't think of anywhere where you get to wake up in the morning frustrated about some sort of systemic injustice and spend the afternoon trying to fix it. Like, it's really that A to B. And so I try to come up with ideas all of the time, and that's just why it's so much fun. And that's what it means to be a policy entrepreneur. But what I'm talking about isn't just I staffed a committee or I reintroduced a bill. It's that I came up with an idea that lives in this uncomfortable space of, is the idea wrong? Is someone going to criticize it? Did I just miss something entirely? And so is someone going to call me stupid, right? Because I was so off base. There's like a universe of being uncomfortable that that sometimes you are wrong, like totally wrong. And you are the stupid one in this, right? But like when it hits, it's special. And you have created an entirely new school of thought around an issue. And it's really just wonderful, and it's what you will be remembered for. And so as a policy entrepreneur, I am looking for those uncomfortable spaces.
Nice. That's great. I think it's important to be able to identify those uncomfortable moments because we experience them every day, but are we logging those as opportunities to fix something?
Absolutely.
That's hard. But, I think if everyone out there is kind of thinking in that mindset, could create really good opportunities inside Congress and new ideas. Being someone inside of Congress who, going back to what you said about the Hill always thinks about this is how we've always done it. How do you balance tradition and establish like this is tradition and this needs to stay the same while finding opportunities to innovate as well?
Oh, this is so good, right? So with the Modernization Committee, everything we wanted to come up with is going to start at a no.
Yeah.
Right, that's just how the workplace is, right?
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
Our job was to figure out a process, a system that would allow us to not get stuck at no, right? And so all the problems that we looked at fit into this like neat triangle for the most part, right? It was like, this is broken because it's broken. Let's fix it. This is broken because of tradition. How do we fix it while still honoring the tradition and maintaining that tradition? And this is broken because it makes something else work. Right.
Gotcha.
And so if we started there, that we were already ahead, and our biggest problem we ran into wasn't the other party. It was nihilists. It was people saying that like, no, this can't be done. This is just how it is. How do you get around them? It's a great question, and it's the same in all of our policy discussions. You have a Republican and a Democrat who look at each other and they start at no, not because they disagree, but because they're like, well, I have to disagree with this person, and their framework is instinctually bad, right? And so we didn't start with here is an idea to change. We would start with, well, this is a problem. We all agree this is a problem. Don't you hate this problem? Because guess what Republicans, Democrats, and everybody likes to do? Complain a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So we bonded over that this is terrible. And then instead of saying, well, here's a solution, we would say, well, let's discuss, like, how could we fix it? Yeah. Here's a pie-in-the-sky idea. I'm just trying to workshop this now. What do you think if we did this to fix it? And they would say, well, great, but that's never going to work, right? And say, but you like it, right? Yeah. This is something that you would like if it did work.
For sure.
And you get people on board that way. Additionally, you always have to stop and say, when there's a disagreement, you have to stop and say, I want to be clear. The disagreement comes because you think this is how it works, and I'm saying how this is how it works. Yeah. And if we can get people to agree on the terms of where we are, we can then start discussing again. But oftentimes we're just talking past each other, and there's this instinct and defensiveness. And so we got people on board through that process of identifying a problem, workshopping it together, and ensuring that we were staying on track of what we were discussing together.
Yeah. So I experienced that type of mindset when starting Connect. I would pitch the idea to hopeful investors or just anyone willing to listen at that point. And a lot of people would say, why are you trying to pursue bipartisanship? Like, that's not going to work. If you really want to make this a good business, just pursue like one party or the other and create something for them. I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. My intention is to create something that brings people together. So for the people out there that say, oh, like bipartisanship, that doesn't really work. What are your thoughts to that?
Yeah, well, bipartisanship is if as a progressive, I'm going to be very frank with you. I'm a true believer, progressive, and part of the reason we were successful on the modernization committee was because I was the trusted progressive, and my counterpart was the trusted conservative. When we went and did things together, people were like, we can trust our person on this, right? Like they're not going to throw us under the bus. They're not seen as kind of squishy middle people.
Gotcha.
But so bipartisanship is both. It's not a goal, in my opinion, right? We should be civil to one another, and we should share ideas. Bipartisanship is very much a tactic, but a good tactic, and you can have benevolence from a tactic. Like you can create a better system through a tactic. My goal at the end of the day is to create systems that decrease inequality, that increase opportunity. Right? That's what I'm trying to do as a progressive, and bipartisanship is inherently what you have to do to get to the next place.
Yeah.
But underneath that, I start with that, like, I just don't distrust people, like, initially.
That's a good start.
Yeah, it's more than just giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think that people, for the most part, have the same goal and intent that I do going into these things. And if you believe that and you go through these other mindsets of, instead of me steamrolling you, we're going to figure this out together. My goal in bipartisanship isn't just to get you to agree with me. It's for us to like find something and create this like new team.
Yeah.
It's referred to in the business world as like swift trust.
Gotcha.
That I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, but we're going to create something together, and in that moment, we're going to form a new team, like an all-star team in baseball, right? Sure. We leave our teams and become a new team, and we're going to fight off whoever we need to get this idea to the end, and that's the ideal scenario with bipartisanship. True brew progressive, I would say that nearing the majority, if not the majority, of my friends are Republicans.
Gotcha.
Palling about around with Republicans, it's just not a big deal. And I think for the most part, my view of people, as long as they don't hold the isms in their soul of racist, sexist, homophobic, and I don't think most people are.
Yeah, I don't think they're inherently that way.
Inherently that way,
but
right? And we can have disagreements, and we do constantly. But I also enjoy arguing in like a mean-spirited way. I like a good debate, even with my friends, and
I feel like sometimes people are closed-minded about talking to people on the other side because they're almost afraid that their beliefs are going to be challenged, or maybe that they don't understand their beliefs well enough to share them across the aisle. How do you combat that? Because you're going to have friends who are Republican. I don't think that's going to change your progressive ideals. Like, it's not going to like shake your whole life to hear the other side. And maybe there's something that opens your mind up and goes, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. But I don't think you're going to have that issue.
I will say one of my goals of going into an argument or a debate is to be proven wrong.
Okay.
I love it. I want to lose a debate. I tell my staff all that all the time. And initially, people are so tense around the chief says something that's got to be done, and I'm with them of like, prove me wrong. And I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm going to accept it, and we're going to do this other thing. Right?
That's great.
It's just a healthier way of looking at life, is that you're not always right.
Yeah, and if like you're creating a culture where it's okay to be wrong, and like it's okay to like dive in, do the research on something, and present a better way to do it. If you create that kind of culture, there's less fear around being wrong and less pride around being right. That's very cool.
That's an engineer's mindset. I'm not an engineer, but a lot of what I try to do is through that mindset of you learn through iteration, and mistakes are success. Mistakes are part of the process. You learn from them and you continue on. I have this new theory that engineers make the best members of Congress because they're able to do, as managers, because they're able to do that. Yeah. You don't want to create a culture of fear in your office, because what people do is they end up hiding it from you, and you're creating this like new, bigger problem for yourself if you do that. As long as people can explain to you why they made a decision, and it makes sense why they made a decision, they didn't hide from you why they made that decision. Just because it didn't work out, it doesn't mean they should be punished. Like, your job as the chief of staff is to have their back in that moment, right? For sure. And so, and many of your failures are only due to timing, right? Like, I remember when I worked for Takano, we introduced this bill on for-profit colleges and regulation around them. and we held a press conference, and the only people that showed up to that press conference were the LaRouche people screaming at him about Glass-Steagall, which is like such a niche group of people. I don't know if you know LaRouche.
No.
You should go down that rabbit hole, but don't go too far. Don't get stuck down there. Yelling at him about that, I got no press coverage. And then Corinthian colleges collapsed a few weeks later, or maybe a month, maybe 2 months later, and we reintroduced the exact same bill and did a press conference and got every piece of press coverage you could think about it, right? Because it was just better timing. But you can't be afraid of putting something out into the universe. I often talk about my team as well as like, just because there's not like a lot of interest. Some part of it is you're planting your flag on this issue and you're trying to put it into the universe so that you are the person when the timing happens on it. If you ever look at in marketing, there's this thing, the news cycle, the news curve, and it's a curve. It makes sense, right? And there's this period where the idea is starting to break, and then journalists are scrambling to get experts on it, try to get more information on it, and you break in at that exact moment, and we'll do what's called newsjacking. You break in that moment, and you become part of the rest of the entire curve. Gotcha. And over here, it's too late to jump in. A lot of people jump in over here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you've put something into the universe, you have credibility as the person on it to jump in and jack the news cycle and become the expert on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many tangents I want to go down right now, but for the sake of time, I do want to move on. I want to talk about some of the members you've worked for. Mm-hmm. First off, we'll get the hard one out of the way. I think a lot of staffers expect if they get put in the wrong situation, if they work for a member who has a downfall, that it's going to affect their career. They're not going to be able to get their next job. So as someone who's been in a hard situation like that with Rep Wiener, how do you recover quickly? Is that the end of your career? Obviously not. You've had a great, successful career since then too. So dispel any incorrect mindsets there.
DC hates a scandal but loves a comeback. Sometimes it takes a little while, and that's okay, right? You have to be open to the opportunities that get put in front of you. And for me, I had to give up a little bit of where I was and who I'd been, and it's not that big of a deal, right? Like, I ended up having to go on the road for a little while to work for the unions, and it was probably one of the most meaningful experiences of my career. I went out to Ohio with the labor movement for a little bit, and then spent a year living in Philadelphia working for the labor movement. And I gave up my my apartment and my social network for 1 year, and moved up and bought a futon like I was back in college, and had had a plastic desk, but I brought some clothes, my laptop, and my Nespresso machine.
Love it.
And did some really cool work in Pennsylvania around the 2012 election cycle that I'm really proud of. Made some really great connections and friends, and then set myself up to come back. It's like, everybody loves a good comeback story.
Nice. It makes me think of some of those stories in the Bible where there are famines that then lead to repositioning of people, and how important that was, those moments. And so it's like, this was your famine, you had to get out of DC, get out of your comfort zone for a little bit, but look at all the great opportunities that came out of that. I think sometimes people are so afraid to leave DC because it's comfortable, right? Like, this is your spot. I'm one of those people. Like, I wouldn't want to leave and have to come back. But can you speak to how important those moments are if you get out of your little Beltway bubble?
Yeah, well, the reason I left was because I was not getting job offers. Qualified, I'd get interviews, but part of them because people want to hear the story, which is really kind of disrespectful in my opinion, and I try not to do that to others. So I had to leave for a little bit, and it really did reset my mindset about what was important. I had a really great experience in Philadelphia being entrepreneur. I worked on a voter ID issue that we did some really good work on. But it did reframe a lot of stuff for me about that, like what's important. And one of them was coming back to DC was a friend network, that this was no longer just a city as a stopover for me. This was like where I wanted to create my life. And here, this is a great city with a great culture and really smart people. And if you've been here for a few years, you eliminate the people who only want to know you for your connections. They're just not in my life. I don't need to meet those people. And you can be more selective, and you can create a longer term experience here, and for me, that's led to a really sustainable life. And I like working on the Hill. I have, even with a family, I don't feel overwhelmed. I work hard, right? But like I don't burn myself out because I reprioritize things. And I think that you're able to do that, and you're able to give that to other people on your team if you go through these types of experiences.
For sure. It's been a very common theme in the interviews we've done, where the people who have really solidified their careers in DC are able to set the proper priorities, and to put family first, and to have good boundaries with your job, and it leads to success. Like it's a possibility. You can do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the more fun parts of your career. Starting off with Rep. Pelosi at the beginning of her speakership. Just let us into that world. Just give us a beat.
Wild. It was wild. Just for me personally. So I was in the personal office, and I was the staff assistant. And George Bush was the president, and essentially the leader of the party was Nancy Pelosi. Mm-hmm. And so, if you were angry at Democrats for whatever reason, that includes people on the left and people on the right. If you were angry at Democrats, you wanted to yell at Nancy Pelosi.
You get the phone call.
Yeah. Well, more than just the phone. But yes, we didn't have a phone room set up, so there was multiple phone lines going all day. There was never a time when there weren't 3 to 5 people on my line, plus the speaker's line. But what I also got the benefit of is if you're mad at the Democrats and want to talk to them in person, you can't go into the Capitol without a meeting.
Yeah, for
But you could definitely come to our office.
Yeah.
We would have so many protesters, people would wait in line. A group would show up, and there would be another group or two waiting outside. This is all real. As I was transitioning in, there were big protests. I don't remember exactly what, but my predecessor ended up on Fox News the day before I started, with a big thing. Him just doing a staff assistant job, and a lot of that taught me just kind of being cool and not overreacting and letting people and get under your skin, and just kind of, and there's a lot of people who have real frustrations, and they should be respected, and that doesn't mean you have to allow them to disrespect you. Both those can exist in the same world.
For sure.
And part of the job is kind of taking those things. Additionally, though, we need to ensure safety for people, and I would never allow anyone on my team to get cursed out or told disrespectful things, or if someone has a real policy thing that they want to get across, then that is their American right, and it makes us stronger for it.
There you go.
But it was a wild experience.
I can imagine.
Wild
What a
experience.
start to your career,
Wild. The phone lines were just off the hook.
I think that was my favorite day on the Hill, is when I got promoted and I no longer had to answer phones. It was just like, oh, thank you.
Oh, yes.
It's over.
Yes. I will say, when I did it too, though, one of the things that was really cool, but it was one of those things that felt like a chore. It was before the Capitol Visitor Center opened.
Gotcha.
And so staff from the personal office gave all the tours.
Cool.
And during spring, I was given 2 tours a day. And it was a lot of work. But you take everything in front of you, and you really just try to lean in and crush it. And I will tell you, that experience being a tour guide is why I'm able to tell stories.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fair
Because
enough.
you tell the same story over and over again. You've got to make it more engaging and
whether
more
it's
interesting.
true or not,
Yeah. I tried to be as truthful as possible. I do have a really good ghost cat story that I totally made up, but from other research,
Yeah, there you go.
And it made me a better storyteller, and it makes me a better kind of more engaging person in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so going ahead a little bit, what are some of your favorite accomplishments from your time on ModCom?
Okay, so I was with ModCom for 2 years. In total, we passed 203 recommendations. I think of them, 105 came in my time there. I have some recommendations that I'm super proud of, but I'm also even more proud of that we had the infrastructure. We built the infrastructure to implement as we were going, and so you see about a third of the recommendations fully implemented already. Another third partially implemented or on their way, and another third still kind of stuck and needing to be
taking their bureaucratic time.
Yeah, but we put that report, and I talked to anybody outside of the Hill who doesn't know what we did, and I say I worked on the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. We improve operations, and their response is good luck with that.
Yeah,
right? I'm sure that went super.
Yeah, I get that response a lot too.
Right. And and then my response is, yeah, a third of them have been fully implemented, and a third, I do that thing, and the jaws just kind of dropped that it actually went somewhere, and that's what I'm super proud of, and and some of my favorites haven't been implemented, right? So I will say the ones that really stand out, they're all about systemic change. They're not about changing the rules to better empower one party or the other, or the moderates or whatever. I love the change to the House Digital Service, the creation of this in-house software development company. Some of the lowest hanging fruits for improving and developing democracies around the world is building software for legislatures that just doesn't exist in a meaningful way. And guess what? It does now, right?
Yeah.
And we're building tools that are really simple but powerful, that improve processes for how we do things. One of my favorite recommendations was actually the only recommendation to ever fail on its first attempt and pass in its second, which has not been implemented, but would allow 2 members of different parties to both fully be sponsors of a bill that was introduced and potentially signed into law. The idea was to create a system of reward for developing a swift trust, a new team, and that's how you create bipartisanship.
Yeah, for sure.
There's just a whole bunch. We continue to implement, like small, lower hanging fruit. One of our favorites was if you had someone ask for a flag to be put in, right?
Yeah, for sure. The
that process
pizza delivery kind of.
Totally, and that was just the reason I like that one so much is there was one staffer on our team who had taken this issue and gone so far down, and had been told no 50 different ways, and took it to completion, and she conquered it. And
shout out Ananda real quick.
Shout out Ananda. And now she is going to be, for many, many years, going to be the person on modernization, because she took this on and completed it.
For sure.
Super proud of people doing that, right? Another dumb one, we used to have a problem. This is one was more complicated because it went into the realm of ethics, right? And when you get to ethics, you're just like, that's how it is. Yep. I'm not going anywhere near it, right? Members will run in, they would come and say, I want to do an event with a tax preparer in my district so that we can get people in my district their taxes done. Yeah. And they would be told, no, the ethics rules say you're not allowed to jointly sponsor an event. You can say in collaboration with, but you can't put any resources towards it. You can't advertise it, right? And it was an ethics problem. And so we started working with ethics and House admin and found that the Senate had the exact same language, or almost the exact same language, but we're allowed to do co-sponsored events because of a different interpretation. And so we worked, and this actually happened because my boss got really, partially because I got across the finish line, because my boss was excited about it too, my current boss. And we changed it so that you can hold co-sponsored events if they are constituent services related. So an immigration event, or tax preparation, or those kind of things with a qualified nonprofit, you're now able to co-sponsor, put both resources in, build the whole event together. And that's just a frustration that people ran into all the time. But a new one that I'm really proud of is, if we're removing anxieties for our constituents who want to come to the Hill, if you are in a wheelchair, there was no drop-off point. Yeah. The drop-off point was in front of Longworth at the bus stop. And let me give you the list of reasons why that's a problem.
It's on a hill.
It's on a hill. It's a bus stop, right? It's very active there. You then have to roll around. You have to get around and get up the sidewalk, find an entrance that's level. Sure. There's just that doesn't have steps. So many problems. And the solution to it is building an ADA accessible drop-off point. That's being done as we speak, cool. Right? This is about how do we remove the difficulty to interact with Congress, which causes a lot of the frustration with Congress. Yeah. How do we remove the difficulties to work through the system and to work together? Because a lot of partisanship comes from just how difficult we make it to work together. Yeah, not even ideology, just we make it difficult. Yeah. And so we did some really interesting systemic work about improving processes so everyone can enjoy this place and the work that we do a little bit more.
Nice, that's great. And to your words about bipartisanship, what we found really cool from the Capitol Pulse newsletter we have, where we're polling staff daily, is there are so many opportunities for bipartisanship that you wouldn't have realized, maybe based on who their member is and why they might disagree. But staffers across the aisle oftentimes agree more based on age than anything else, and it's not on party. So now working for the first Gen Z member of Congress, with that in mind, where do you think the future of Congress is going as we get more younger people representing our districts?
Yeah. Well, almost all of our bills, not almost all of, but majority of our bills that we've introduced have been bipartisan. There's more agreement, and a lot age, but also region changes so much. You're trying to kind of find these joint experiences, right, that you can come together on and identify outside of who you are as a party. If you both like soccer, if you both, if you both share the same faith, if you both come from the same region, you can find agreement across those to create new things. And that's also a way to kind of de-escalate things. Is like if you're arguing with someone and you can stop back and say, we're both parents, it quickly de-escalates things with people. And you should find more opportunity to do those things together. Young people have the same experience. They have a shared lived experience. One of the things that we struggled with on modernization, and it was also not just nihilism, but was with this belief that the past was so much better. Just 20 years ago, everything was better. And I'll tell you what, I've been here almost 20 years ago. It wasn't magically better. I don't know when this 20 years ago was that things were so much better, but they weren't that much better. There's some truth to it, right? Like the Congress was made up of a more homogenous group of people.
Life was a little simpler.
Straight Christian white men who had all served in World War II together. Their sources of news were through a much smaller lens, right? Like we're just they all went and had whiskey and steaks afterwards, right? Like they brought their families and they played on the weekend together, shared experiences. We're not that country anymore. We represent a more diverse electorate. And our members are more, but you still have to create systems that allow these people to find commonalities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was getting at like systems make it so difficult. One of my favorite recommendations that we didn't talk about was this idea that I've got an idea, and it's not partisan. It's this new idea, never been discussed before, and I want to work with someone on the other side of the aisle on it. I don't know how to identify the perfect person for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? What I can look for is a person who normally sponsors bills across the aisle. And that person, but I don't know if that person cares about my niche issue, right? So how do I identify that person? I do some Google searches. I see if there's a background. Maybe they worked in that field or something like that. But if we could break down that barrier, and so what I came up with was we would refer to it as, for the committee we were working on, it was Craigslist for policy, right? Like Democrats seeking Republican to work on this issue. And it was the exact same system, right? Where you don't have to put your name on it because you don't want to be, we're trying to work inside Congress. You don't want to be embarrassed for like seeking a Republican to work on. But if someone on the other side of the aisle clicked it and said, I'm interested, you then as a member could either choose to respond or choose to ignore if you didn't want to work with that person, right? And now we're breaking down these barriers and just making it more easier to kind of find someone who cares about your niche issue that's not partisan.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love that. This is great. I think people who heard this need to go get a coffee with you because there's probably so much that we didn't cover in all of this. But thank you for taking the time today. Your mindset around being willing to be proven wrong and finding ways to work with the other side without having to agree on everything or to dislike them is just so great. And so thank you for being a part of this.
Absolutely.
How can people reach out to you? Or just like LinkedIn, shoot you an email? What is it?
Shoot me an email, but I want to hear people that are like looking to push ideas and how to get ideas across the aisle. I happily help people with their careers, but like what gets me really excited is finding people who have an interesting idea.
Good stuff. Love to hear it. Please reach out. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Capital Spotlight podcast. If you enjoyed the show today, be sure to subscribe to our channels to stay updated on our latest releases and get our shows early. Share the show with your friends and rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For more from Connect, follow us on our social media, Connect app, CNCT app, and subscribe to our daily newsletters and check out our website. It's capitalconnect.com. Capital is spelled with an O. See you next time.